Good morning, afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Carrie Getz, and we are here with another edition of this podcast series talking about careers for women, trades, and vets in tech. And we are super lucky today to have Jillian Bird here, who actually works in HR, which I think is probably a gatekeeper to making sure, and a lot of folks get into the industry. And also, she is a military spouse, which is kind of what we're going to focus and talk about today, some of the programs to get spouses to work and some of the challenges, certainly for spouses in the industry. So, Jillian, tell everybody hello and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am Jillian. I am an Army wife. My husband is active duty in the Army and currently stationed in Oahu, Hawaii. He's been serving our wonderful country for the last 12 and a half years, proudly, and will most likely be a lifer.
Very good. And thank him for his service. And thank you. It's a family commitment. I know everybody kind of takes a part in that. So, let's talk about this a little bit, right? How long has he been in Hawaii?
We moved to Hawaii January of 2020.
See, so that's what a lot of people don't understand. That's kind of a barrier to a lot of military spouses in the industry. And the majority of those tend to be women, by the way. And we do have a big critical shortage for women in the industry. And so when women try to get jobs in this industry, one of the hurdles is that they've moved around a lot, they've bounced around a lot. So let's talk about, if you were going to advise some of these women, what are some parallel skills to highlight on your resume? What are some things that you could do to help in the industry? How did you figure out this industry and even get into HR? So maybe if you talk about your journey a little bit and how it gelled for you, that'll help some other folks.
So my journey is a little unique in the fact that HR was not something that was on my radar, nor was necessarily the data center industry. I did kind of want to get into something that was technical just because I knew that that was a growing industry. I just didn't really have any direction. One of my husband's best friends from middle school, Adam Case, they speak very often. Adam Case works for Salute Mission Critical. And one day I just kind of jokingly asked him, "Hey, do you have any remote opportunities?" And he said, "Yes, actually," to my surprise. I really was not expecting a yes because I know a lot of people do look for remote positions, and I really did not offer any special skill sets that would apply to any of this. But I thought, what the heck, I'm going to apply. So I did. I forwarded my resume to Adam, who forwarded it to Ryan, our vice president of HR. And Ryan was so generous and took a chance on me. And so far, it's been wonderful. Um,
That's awesome. So I think a lot of folks are kind of, women as a whole tend to be afraid to go after opportunities. And there's been studies that say that women only apply to a job if they feel like they meet 100% of the qualifications, whereas a man will apply for a job when he thinks he meets about 60% of the qualifications. And clearly, if you're jumping into a new industry, that's very, very different. And also, I would say probably one of the good things, the only good thing that came out of COVID is that a lot of companies now do support remote work, which is pretty great. But as you work through this and you were talking to him, what did you do certification wise? What did you do for on the job training or training to get you into HR?
So for myself, Ryan actually spoke with me. He gave me two interviews. The first one, I didn't know what to expect. I really had no idea. And Ryan was so kind that he said, "Here, look up recruiting instructional videos on YouTube, do some research on recruiting," because I really didn't know that this was a recruiting position. So I did that, and then we set up another meeting to interview again. So I had my chance to really research the job, research the company, and I was so grateful that Ryan gave me that second opportunity and gave me the chance to prove myself. As far as the skill sets that I brought to the table, like I said, I had never done anything in HR. It wasn't even on my radar. I had never done anything in the data center industry. What I have done, though, is I have moved around a lot. I have had to put myself in uncomfortable situations and learn how to step out of my comfort zone, because if I didn't, I would never feel comfortable outside of my own home or even in my home, because I'm moving around every 2 to 3 years. So, how does a person make friends? How does a person make connections? How do you get around town? You have to step outside of your comfort zone. So, learning how to do that and having it become a regular part of my life really helped me in my position today. It's much easier for me to talk to a candidate who's nervous, because I can recognize those signs and I can try to help break down those barriers and really be able to talk to them about our opportunities versus just kind of catching them off guard and making them nervous about these opportunities. It also helps me because we're hiring veterans, and we're actively seeking veterans and their spouses for our opportunities. And I have a connection to them. I'm able to connect to them on a real level, and it helps them open up and also feel that this opportunity is going to be a right fit, because we offer that sense of community that really you don't get anywhere else other than in the military. I mean, the only people that understand that sense of community are the people who have served or have been family members of service members.
Okay, so you bring up two really good points, and let's touch on those. So the first point is looking at YouTube and finding alternate places to learn things. There's a hashtag that follows this podcast, hire the person, not the paper. I understand that college degrees are important and they're in the cards for some people, but certainly not for everybody. And I think people have forgotten, A, that there's a massive amount of work for trades. B, there's other ways to learn besides going to college and sucking up a bunch of college debt. So talk about kind of the certification process and some of those things that Salute helps people go through as they get a job, and then we'll move on to point number two.
Okay, so Salute has a mission to hire veterans, and they also have an understanding that this is one of my favorite things about Salute, honestly, is that service members learn a very highly sought out skill set throughout their service that doesn't always easily translate to the civilian world. Sometimes it does, like just with certain positions, but sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily, it's not an obvious translation. But we, being mainly veterans and everybody being very familiar with the specific jobs in the military, they have a good understanding of what you actually did when you were serving and how that might apply to the data center industry. And that not only did you learn the skill set, but you're clearly trainable. And we like to take that and train you into, we do a lot of like data center technicians. We have a lot of entry level positions like that, that will teach people or candidates the mechanical and electrical skill sets that they need to do facilities maintenance, or some of the other skill sets to do like data center technician jobs, like running cables and racking, stacking servers and whatnot. We tend to hire for those positions more often than we do with the more senior positions. People can easily apply to these jobs and learn these skills with our company.
Okay, so the second point that I wanted to bring up and talk about is, let's talk about a military spouse, right? There's a lot of skills and things that happen as a military spouse. You sort out a new place, you do all the project management of getting the moves done, and you put yourself in those uncomfortable positions. So if you were talking to a military spouse and you said, hey, look, as you're developing your resume, here are some parallel skills that will translate, or here are some things that you could highlight about yourself that would help you be more successful in your career. So if you were going to start and have a mentee that was a military spouse that had done nothing in mission critical, how would you help them structure their resume? What recommendations would you give to help them be desirable in the job market?
Boy, that's a tough one. Just specifically thinking of my position, what skills did I actually bring to the table that I didn't realize could apply to what I do? The first thing is, it's back to the fact that I'm moving around a lot and I'm having to step out of my comfort zone. I can quickly learn about my surroundings. I can quickly adapt to my surroundings, and I can make a conversation with just about anybody, whether we have anything in common or not. That's so important in HR. We're human resources. You have to have good communication skills. And throughout my experience of having to move around, I definitely picked up a lot of communication skills. Organizational skills. When you're doing talent acquisition, you're not just working on recruiting for one position at a time. You're working on several, and they're all for the different skill levels, different hiring managers, and everybody wants candidates right now. In that, obviously you have to figure out how to prioritize your time and be able to give results to everybody and keep all of your team happy and feeling like you're there for them, that you're going to help them find the candidates for these positions. So when you bring up like all the moving around and having to do it on a certain time, that kind of plays into what I do. I have those organizational skills. I can meet deadlines. And, talent acquisition, I feel, is very similar to sales, which for me, I used to wait tables, which is kind of sales as well. You're selling food and alcohol, and it sounds kind of funny that they are sales related, but when I talk to a candidate, the first thing I do is tell them about Salute. I'm trying to sell them on our company more so than I am the position, the title, or the pay. I mean, obviously, those are all things that are very important to candidates, but I think most of us appreciate culture as well. And I I'm confident and comfortable enough to sell Salute. I really enjoy working for the company. I like that sense of military community that I get, and knowing that I have an employer that understands my lifestyle is a comforting feeling. So those organizational skills, time management, communication, whether or not you have actually done those in a professional setting, you've still done those in life as a military spouse, and putting those on your resume, I think are all wonderful skill sets that any employer should appreciate.
And that, I think, is really important. I mean, even for a lot of the jobs, whether you're a military spouse or not, being able to highlight some of the things that your competencies and things that you're good at is a good thing on any resume. But women, we're not really raised to toot our own horns. We're not raised to showcase our talent. And I think that's kind of difficult in some cases when it comes across a resume. But being able to have an HR person that can advocate for you and really sponsor you in a position, I think is really important. So let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about, since you are a military spouse, your husband is on TDY right now, so it's you and the kids. So how do you juggle it all? How do you put it all together? What are some of your challenges, and what are, especially through COVID, with all the homeschooling, how do you sort all that out? What are some tips?
I cry myself to sleep every night, Carrie. No.
I hope not. I hope not.
No, I am a planner. I have everything written out. I organize until I cannot organize anymore. Something that is worth mentioning. All three of my children have ADHD. So time management and organizational skills are just not natural to them. And I am my family's organizer. I am their planner. So how do I survive? I first, I make a list and then I start prioritizing what's important. How can we get through this? In my in my household with my children, I have a list written up for my children that is their accountability chart. That's what I call it. And it's very simple stuff, wake up by this time, brush your hair, brush your teeth and whatnot. And I have to I have to be present with that list and make sure that I am keeping it up to date. Otherwise, it doesn't work. My kids and I will run through the process of what's to be expected the next day, every single night. We plan out what's for breakfast, what's for lunch, what are we wearing, all of that. So again, it's huge organizational skills, keeping a calendar, making sure that you're balancing your time out. That's honestly probably the hardest thing for me as a military spouse working full time, having three kids and my spouse being gone, is balancing my own time. And I have to learn how to cut that time out for myself every single day. My kids know I have a hard stop at 6 p.m., no questions, no, nothing. You leave me alone and let me have my quiet time so that I can reset and be ready for the next day and be my best self. And it's working out pretty well so far.
That's probably important for everybody, whether their husband's gone on TDY or not, to take that time out. And it is, there's a lot of attrition for women in this industry, which is really unfortunate because all of the talk this industry does about diversity and inclusion, it's a little hard to say that you're diverse when you are the majority male, right, in any industry. And so I think being able to find that balance is important really for anybody, but especially women in this industry, because it can be tough. It can really be tough.
Yeah. And I love Salute. I have a wonderful supervisor, Robin, who is more than understanding. I was really stressed out before my husband went TDY I'm a person that likes control. And I felt that sense of losing control with my husband leaving right at the same time my kids were going to be starting to go back to the public school system for the first time in 3 years. This is a huge transition for our family. And I spoke with Robin and I said, hey, we have a couple school days that I'm required to be there to meet the teachers. My kids have to go through another assessment for their ADHD. And Robin just said, don't worry about it. We'll be fine. Take care of your family. Family's first. And I wasn't surprised by this answer because Robin's absolutely wonderful, but at the same time, I was, and I was relieved to know that my employer doesn't only understand my lifestyle, but they support it. And that's comforting at the end of the day to know that I'm not being thought of in a negative way because I am essentially a single parent right now, and I don't have any other option for somebody taking my kids to school and picking them up. It's all me. My employer knows. They know that I need some time to take care of my family, and if I do take care of my family and I'm given that time, that they're going to get the best work out of me.
Yeah, I think so many companies have really gotten away from being good to their people, especially as companies get bigger and bigger. People become numbers, and it's one thing to say, oh yeah, we have this perk, that perk, this perk, that perk, but then if you discourage people from taking those perks, then it really doesn't do any good. And I think, especially since we're talking about military today, I think it's important for all of those that are coming back to regular citizenry life that there's going to be some ups and downs, and there's going to be some challenges, and there's going to be some hiccups. And having an employer that understands that part of your life because they've lived it, I think really makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. It absolutely does. I mean, I think we've all probably had our experiences of working for a toxic employer. It makes a huge difference.
So, yeah, I mean, quality of life is really important, I think, with any job. And certainly if you're dealing with the stress of your husband being gone, all of those things, I think, kind of weigh in. Let's talk about a little bit about the recruitment process. So, suppose that some of our listeners are about to come off of duty, retire, get out of the military for however, whatever they're going to do. And let's talk about how they go about finding a job. Obviously, they can reach out to Salute. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has a skills bridge program, which a lot of employers don't like the paperwork, but there are folks to help you with that too. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has a great program both for military folks and their spouses. The only downfall I see to that program is that it requires that you have an associate's degree or better, at least for the spouses program. And I think that a lot of our jobs in this industry don't require a degree. They just don't. And, on the job training worked for a lot of people for a lot of years. Certainly in the military, a lot of that's on the job training too, right? You learn on the fly. Same thing for spouses, they learn on the fly. But if somebody's trying to get in that recruitment mode or figure out these employers and figure out what the next steps are, what do you suggest that they do?
That's kind of a difficult question. I guess personally, I would love if they would reach out to a recruiter like myself and say, "Hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I really want to do." I don't really know how other recruiters operate. I know for myself that if you come to me and you say, "I'm looking for a chief engineer position located in Dallas, Texas," and we don't have that opportunity available right now, I would like to remain in contact with that person so that when another opportunity does come up that is kind of in line with what they're looking for, I can address it with them. I can bring it up. I've actually had a candidate who I originally spoke with back at the beginning of this year, like January or February, and he had an excellent skill set, but it was a very specific skill set, and it was difficult for me to find a position within our company that was open to his skill set, but also offering the salary that would reflect his experience. But I didn't give up. Every time there was an opportunity, I would forward his resume to a hiring manager, say, "Hey, this is who this person is. This is what they bring to the table." And he's an Army veteran, and it took some hard work, but I never gave up on him, and we continued to kind of check in with each other every few weeks. He would email me saying, "What about this position? What about that?" And eventually, at the same time, two opportunities became available, and we had two different hiring managers trying to hire him. So, for anybody that's looking for an opportunity, anybody that's getting ready to get out, have those conversations with recruiters. If recruiters call you, if they reach out to you, and even if it's for a specific opportunity, tell them, give them some feedback, let them know, like, "Hey, no, that's not what I'm looking for, but this is what I really want. This is where I want to be." And if they're a good recruiter and they're a good listener, which they should be as a recruiter, then they'll hear you and they'll keep their ears out for those opportunities for you. Another thing is, ask ask a recruiter if you could continue to keep in touch with them, or if there is a way to continue to keep in touch with them until you find that opportunity.
I think that, and I think it's also important to try to, especially if you're trying to jump in a new career, talk to some folks in the industry and kind of see what their day to day is. So when they do get on an interview like you did, right, you got a second chance. Not everybody gets that second chance. Matter of fact, most people do not get that second chance. So it pays to do your homework a little bit and kind of see. And I think LinkedIn and some of those other sites are probably good for that. And certainly, I know that we work through some of the TAP offices and try to help people that are leaving the military. But everybody has their ear. There's a lot of people that want to hire military folks, not just in this particular vertical, but in lots of different industries. I think too that's something that people don't realize is how broad this industry is. There is literally every job description you can have available in this industry almost. I mean, outside of maybe mortician, but other than that, some of these companies have their own doctors, they have their own medical staff, they have their own cleaners, they have salespeople, there's manufacturers, the list is kind of endless. And to your point, if you get with a really good recruiter, they're going to be in tune not to what's just at their company, but they're going to be talking to other recruiters and they're going to know some of the other things that are open out there. And so I think all of those are probably pretty important steps just for getting the word out and figuring out what those jobs are. And if you see a job and you're kind of intrigued by what the title is, reach out to somebody on LinkedIn that has that job. Most people are more than happy to kind of help you out, especially for women in the industry. Most of us try to uplift other women and be helpful in those efforts. So the fact that you work remote is cool, right? That's definitely helpful. What have you thought about going back to an office? Is that something that you want to do, or are you loving the remote thing?
Oh boy, I remote is definitely preferred for myself. I do wish I had like coworkers that I could go get happy hour with at the end of the day, or just, call and say, let's go out to dinner after work, or even go out to lunch in the middle of our shift. I'm a social person and I miss having that type of a relationship, because that's what I had when I at my last position, which was waiting tables. I mean, the restaurant was like a family. After a shift, we would all go out together. I miss that, but I still really appreciate the opportunity to move remote. It's comforting to know that if my husband were to come down on orders today, that I am still going to have a job in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, however long it takes to move, that my employer's still here, that I can continue to work throughout that PCS. Or like right now, I'm planning a trip home for the first time in 3 years, and I don't need to request time off to go see my family. I can continue to work from them and still see my family and not use all of my PTO to go visit family, which I think is something that military families tend to struggle with, is balancing out their PTO or their leave with, do we go home and visit family, or do we go and explore the world, like and see something that we want to do. With a remote position, it kind of gives you that freedom.
I think that's part of the reason that a lot of these young kids now, after COVID, are kind of insisting that remote work is part of what they do. But, it depends. Not everybody can work remotely, right? Manufacturing folks can't. If you're doing maintenance in a data center, or a lot of the jobs in a data center, a lot of the trades, you can't work remotely. And so I think that's kind of tricky, especially for folks that have been used to moving around a lot, to set those roots up and have that, and we're going to be here for a hot minute kind of attitude, right? And figure out how that works. So are you guys planning on or hoping to call Hawaii home for a very long time, or you're at
If
the mercy of Uncle
I,
Sam?
yeah, if I had a choice in the matter, we would never leave the island. But yeah, I've always been for whatever is going to help my husband in his career. So I would love to stay here and as long as we can. But I think we all know that sometimes staying at one duty station is not good for career progression, and you kind of need to go and get different experience from other duty stations. So I don't know. We do have another couple years here, I believe, at least a year and a half, if not two. Who knows what's next? We would love to go back to Europe. That was a wonderful place to live.
Kind of to the same point, in this industry, there's so many jobs that do so many different things. I think there's really opportunities for anybody and everybody. And I would encourage people to reach out to the chamber, to reach out to your local base, to reach out to organizations like Salute and Overwatch and some of those that are very veteran friendly and want to hire veterans within that space. So we're bumping up pretty close to this time here, and we'll put links to all of this, of course, out there. But if you had some parting words of wisdom that you wanted to leave with folks, some encouragement, what would you tell people?
If you have any interest in the data center industry, and you wanted to talk to a recruiter, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have that conversation with anybody or any of the recruiters with our team. They're all wonderful. We are all pretty knowledgeable on every single opportunity within Salute, whether it's something that we're actively working on ourselves or if it's our teammates' responsibility to work on that. We still have a lot of knowledge in that position. And just to kind of touch back on remote versus in office, as a military spouse, what if you go into a data center as a technician in Arizona and then your spouse comes down on orders to move to Texas? There's data centers everywhere. They are everywhere. So whether Salute has the opportunity for you or not, you have now learned that skill set, which is a trade. And it's a very useful and sought out trade right now. This is a huge growing industry. So there's a lot of career opportunities to everybody in this industry, a lot of room for growth. Salute will, we have that mindset that we're ready to train you and get you into this trade, and you can easily take your experience and apply to other companies if you do come down on orders and it's time to move. So it shouldn't be too hard to find another position.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great point. There are literally so many types of jobs in this industry that if you start and you don't like something, don't leave the industry. Just go to one of the other jobs because there's hundreds of them. And I think networking is really, really important. And I know that networking is kind of tough for some folks that work remotely. And it's easy to kind of do some of that networking with folks in your company on conference calls and things like that. Within the industry, there are other networking calls. There's lots of folks that will help. If you see someone, ask someone, and certainly there's help out there. Well, Jillian, thank you so much for your time. You've been an amazing guest. It's been very helpful, and I think you've given some great tips to some folks. And she is at Salute. So again, if you need to reach her, the links will be in the description for this podcast, but it is Salute Mission Critical. Tell your husband again, thank you for your service. And for the rest of you, we look forward to you listening on another edition of this podcast series. Thanks again, Jillian.
Thanks, Carrie.